Hey, this is Steve Domenico in the Room podcast with a special guest. I got Gary Batman Balletto on talking about making his pro boxing debut for CES Boxing on November 23rd at Twin Rivers Casino, his home at his past career or even future career of MMA. Welcome to the show there, Gary. Glad to talk to you. What's been going on, bro?
Just enjoying my son and the time to take a step back and sometimes you get a better view when you take one step backward and just getting my whole game plan put together and then planning what's next.
Well, Gary, everyone knows you from, your MMA, your successful MMA career. I think your last fight was about over a year and a half ago. Took some time off, a lot of stuff going on between then and now. We're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on and how you got to this point where you're going to make your professional boxing debut. So, Gary, from that last fight, dude, what's been going on since that fight, and what were you thinking coming off that fight? Because you did get a really bad injury from that fight that took you out for some time. So, what's been going on since then?
Well, yeah, as you know, I broke my jaw in that fight. Most people don't know I broke my jaw 6 days before that fight. And, it was a small fracture. I took the risk and didn't want to let fans down, the TV programming down, the ticket sales. Didn't want to let didn't want to let everybody down. So I did the show anyway, thinking, I wouldn't get hit. And then I didn't go in there fighting like I didn't want to get hit. I walked forward, hands low. I don't think, I don't know where my head was at the moment, but now, fast forwarding maybe 8 months later, I broke my jaw a second time, which delayed me, or 6 months later or less, delayed me from coming back again. I wanted to fight again 6 months after that fight. So that took me out for some time again, and it turned out I had a problem with my teeth, and my wisdom teeth were going into my jawbone, compacted backward, and I had what's called dancing roots. Kind of looked like my roots were like a grappling hook, peeling into my jawbone and taking up, all the space on the lower mandible, and just, I was missing a big chunk of it in the first place, so it was inevitable to happen. But hearing that news that, hey, we know what the problem is, that I've never heard anything greater than that. I was really worried that, thinking what's going to happen when next time I get hit, my jaw's going to break again. I always said I had a great chin, but now I got a glass jaw. What's going on?
Yeah.
And, but hearing that there was a reason for it and a way to fix it was big news for me. And since then, I've been really focusing on getting back to my boxing roots and my stand-up. I feel like I was letting that slip a little, and putting all that effort back into it. I was preparing to step back into the cage, and come to find out the last local show they're doing with CES was coming up, last month, and I'd have to wait some time to jump back in, and I wanted to get my feet wet again. So I just sat on the couch one day and I thought, what if there's a boxing show coming up? Let me ask and see what happens, and here we are.
Well, here you go, making your pro debut. And, for the MMA fans, which might not know because, you were mainly MMA for the last 3 years, you got your start basically in the boxing ring, right? Amateur fighter,
Yeah.
pretty successful amateur fighter, following your dad's footsteps. What went on that, you were very successful in boxing? What made you get into MMA when you were so successful as an amateur boxer?
I think it was always something I was drawn to, and it was something I planned to do before I spent even more time boxing. I was interested since I was a kid watching it, and I wrestled through elementary school, middle school, high school, And I've done jiu-jitsu since I was 13 years old, and never super seriously until I was ready to go, but turn pro, I mean. But I did plan on boxing, and I don't recall exactly what happened, but I remember there being a card falling through with the boxing side of things, and they said, "Hey, we have an MMA show coming up," and I said, and instantly I said, "Okay." I believe it was about 4 weeks notice too, or 4 weeks notice or 5 weeks notice. I switched over to MMA. No amateur background, no
No,
amateur experience, no nothing.
no.
I just did it. And
Made your pro debut in MMA after boxing all that. So
I did, yeah, yeah. And I was always, I never backed down from a challenge out of fear of the outcome. I've always just dove into things, and I wouldn't say carelessly, but um, I always willing to take the shot and see where it goes. You know,
well, taking the shot now. You're scheduled to make your pro debut, where you made your pro debut as your MMA pro debut with
yeah.
CES. How does that feel to make your pro debut there?
No, it's awesome. It's our home turf, and especially going back into boxing. My a lot of my following came from my dad's supporters, and our family and friends, and they've been through the circuit when my dad has fought. So going to into MMA, it was foreign to everybody. Everybody said, "Hey, we're boxing fans, but we'll show up because it's Gary Jr. Or Gary's son." Um, and now going back to boxing, I think a lot of our family and friends are really excited about it. When I called my dad that afternoon, I came up with the idea. Just the sound of his voice, the excitement in his voice was so cool. And it got me more excited, because this is something he understands and something he's more comfortable with. It made him sick watching me step into the cage every time, not knowing what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
You know.
He
um,
had to learn MMA real quick.
Yeah, and he did. He's
Yeah.
he's gotten a lot more knowledgeable
Yeah.
to it over the years, but it's still something he hasn't experienced for himself, and it just feels like foreign territory to him. So, but it feels right to be doing this now. It seems like this is where my journey's taking me next, and I'm excited to follow it.
Well, not only has your journey taken you into the boxing ring, you're actually opened up or you remodeled your dad's gym, and
Yeah.
now it's a beautiful place. You are there full time. You are teaching. You are training. How does that feel to actually, be on the outside now? Training people to get into that ring. How does that feel to actually, be part and own a gym yourself now?
Yeah, so we've had the gym since I was a baby. I would say my dad opened it the year I was born. It actually started off on Elmwood Avenue, where 401 is now, 401 Boxing,
Yep.
and he moved over and bought that building about 15 years ago. And 5 years ago, my dad was in that accident and paralyzed from the chest down. And since then, the gym it hasn't been the same. It was really just kind of closed and used privately, and sometimes people would find a way in there and use it, and we rented it out for a little bit, once or twice, and so it was sitting there again, and we had a conversation to said, what are we going to do with this space, because he owns the building, and we needed to come up with a plan what we're going to do. So I just said, hey, I'll do it. I'll get it set up. We'll get it going again, and restore it to back how it was, and better. It's updated. Everything's brand new. Um, New ring, turf, bags. It looks great in there, and it's fun to be surrounded by that boxing atmosphere again, and having having that place that feels like home. Not that Triforce and such doesn't feel like home,
Hmm.
but just back to the place where I grew up and back to my boxing roots at the same time. Surrounded by all that boxing, definitely put some things in my mind about boxing too, of course, and and training with people and working with other athletes and such. It does make you think more and hold yourself more accountable for your fundamentals and your technique and makes you focus a little bit more than somebody just training themselves and I think mostly you just hold yourself to a higher standard of the technique of the sport, and I think that makes for a better fighter sometimes.
Exactly. Going through them motions that sometimes, just come natural to you now, you can break them down because you're teaching someone else. And like you said, I
Yeah,
would imagine, being there and being in that boxing atmosphere 24/7, that lit, kind of a fire under your butt that, hey, I can get into that ring and I can
yeah,
box. And this is the perfect opportunity now, the last card of the year for CES, November 23rd, with an all star cast of
oh,
fighters on there. Peter
yeah,
Manfredo Jr. coming back. You got Bling Bling on that card. You got, Shayner on that card. You got all
yeah.
these young up and coming fighters. Gary, do you have an opponent announced, or is there anything, or is that
Yeah,
still under wraps right now?
we've had a few opponents. We thought we had set and changed their mind and backed pulled out for whatever reasons, and just about less than a week ago we got somebody finally locked down, um, and embarrassingly I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he does have an MMA background too. He's 3-0 in MMA. He's 2-2 in boxing.
Oh, good.
Um, so he's a game opponent.
Yep.
He's tall, fighting light heavyweight 175. Um, so it's a little heavier than I fought in MMA, but I fought at 179 in I'm sorry 189 in amateur boxing
Wow.
before. So it's not the heaviest I've ever competed at, but it's definitely a step up, and at this level and a pro level, and it's it's cool. It's cool to be on a card with all these guys
Yeah.
though, like Peter, and going back to my dad's history, my dad and Peter have been on cards, a few times I believe, and together, and it's cool to be on a card with him, and we work together throughout this camp, and it's cool being part of that, and he looks great. Um, we've had Nick DeLumba. He started out at our gym, you know, 15 years ago almost, and he's on the card. He's looking sharp. It's going to be a great card, man. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Excellent. And I was going to ask you a question, like, yeah, who's getting you ready for training? Who's training with you? And you just named, most of them right there. Uh, you know,
Yeah, Victor
it,
Fagnan is coaching me for
yeah,
this show, and Chuck Sullivan. Um, we have some help with Brian Pinocchio also. We have a great team, great sparring partners behind us. Kid TJ over at Fight Factory and Hassler down at Ray Alvera's gym. We've had a lot of great work and great guys to work with. It's awesome.
excellent, excellent. Well, we're a couple of weeks away from this. What is the difference between the last 2 weeks getting ready for a boxing match and the last 2 weeks getting ready for an MMA match?
I'll tell you one thing, it's so much easier to train for boxing. Not that boxing is easier,
Yeah.
it's just as difficult, maybe even more difficult to go from MMA to boxing rather than vice versa because, it's like tying your hands behind your back. But um, at the same time, just the training itself, you're preparing for one art, you're taking a lot less wear and tear on your body. It's an hour of conditioning and an hour of boxing a day. It's not an hour of boxing, an hour of wrestling, an hour of jiu-jitsu, an hour of you know different kind of strength and conditioning, which is a little more anaerobic and more strain on the muscle, and it's definitely like a breath of fresh air to get back to the boxing training. You know, I forgot how much I enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, last question before I let you give you shout outs there, Gary. 2020, you're having this boxing pro debut. You talked before, you were like, oh, is there any more MMA cards? No, I have boxing. Is
Yeah,
2020, are you going boxing? You going MMA? Are you going to just bounce back and forth and keep busy as you like?
I have no idea. You know, I mean, I'd like to get back to an MMA fight, you know, as soon as possible. You know, but at the same time, you know, I got to see what's laid out in front of me and and see where you know, it's not only my decision. Um, you know, I have a lot of trust in my team and you know, between my dad and you know, my coaches and management, and you know, we make these decisions together. And you know, after this, we're gonna get together, put our heads together, see where we're at, and make that decision.
Awesome. Well, Gary, can't wait to see you on the 23rd, man. I've never seen you box. You came out. I came onto the scene when you well into your
Yeah,
MMA career. So, Gary, this is going to be a special thing for
and it's gonna
CES
be great.
Boxing, a special night just for boxing in general to have one of the Balletto men back in that ring at CES. So, last thing, Gary, shout outs and social media because I know that you still got tickets and they're selling fast. You might not have them long, so shout it out.
Yeah, we're definitely selling out quick. There's so many names on this card. You know, 8 big names on the card, and it's gonna sell out fast. So I have some left. If you know, you guys out there can come grab some. I have them. It helps me out personally to get them through me. If there's another fighter you support, get it through them because it does help the fighter um, rather than buying them at the door through the promotion itself. Um, and you know, thank you to my coaches. You know, Victor Tagnan, Chuck Sullivan, Brian Panaki. Thank you for you know, your help and support. Also, thank you to all these coaches and their gyms. You know, having their doors open to me. My sparring partners, you know, they've all been great. Like I mentioned earlier, TJ and Hassler and Peter and Nick even Colombo. You know, it's been great. It's been a fun camp. We're excited to see. I'm excited to see all these guys on the card too. You know, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be a fun night.
Excellent. And 2020 is going to hold a lot for all these fighters, including yourself. A big, big
Yeah.
debut here. Like you said, you don't know what they're going to, what your coaches are going to do in 2020, but, you're going to be active no matter what. So, Gary Balletto, Batman Balletto, thank you so much for giving me time. And Gary
Always, brother.
Balletto, CES Boxing Pro Debut, November 23rd, Saturday night, Twin Rivers
Uh,
Casino. Be there. We will
let's
be.
go.